The sun came up over the mountains like it always did, painting the dry earth in shades of gold and brown. Amina was already awake. She'd been awake for an hour, helping her mother prepare the morning bread. There wasn't much flour left, so the dough felt thin between her fingers. Her mother worked in silence, her face tight with worry. Amina was 12 years old. She had dark eyes that were too serious for a child, and hands that were rough from work. In another life, she might have been in school, giggling with friends, dreaming about the future. But this wasn't another life. This was rural Afghanistan in 2002, and in her village, girls like her didn't have time for dreams. Her 3 younger brothers were still sleeping on the floor of their small mud brick home. Her father had left before dawn. He did that most mornings now, walking to neighboring villages to look for work, for food, for anything that might keep his family alive. The drought had destroyed everything. The fields that once grew wheat were now just dust. The well in the village center had run dry months ago. Women walked 3 hours to the nearest water source, carrying heavy jugs on their backs. Amina's mother placed the flatbread on the hot stone. The smell made Amina's stomach ache with hunger. They would each get a small piece. It had to last until evening. "Go wake your brothers," her mother said quietly. "Your father will be home soon." Amina nodded and moved to where her brothers slept. Little Rashid, who was only 5, looked so small under the thin blanket. She touched his shoulder gently. He stirred and smiled up at her. That smile always made her heart feel warm, even on the hardest days. By the time her father returned, the sun was high and hot. Amina could tell something was wrong the moment she saw his face. He looked older somehow, more tired than usual. He carried a bundle under his arm, wrapped in cloth. Her mother saw it too and stopped moving. The air in the room changed. "Children, go outside," their mother said. Her voice was strange, too high. "But Mama," Rashid started. "Now." The boys obeyed, but Amina lingered near the doorway. Something in her chest felt tight, like a rope pulling. She pressed herself against the wall where she couldn't be seen but could still hear. "There's no other way," her father was saying. His voice cracked. "We're starving. The boys need to eat. You need to eat." "Don't say it," her mother whispered. "Please don't say it. Khalid came to me this morning. He's offering a rifle and 50 kilos of grain, enough to get us through to spring. Maybe longer if we're careful." Amina's hands went cold. Khalid was the merchant from the next village. He was fat and mean, with hard eyes that made her skin crawl whenever he visited. He traded weapons and supplies. People said he had connections with dangerous men. "She's a child," her mother said. "Our daughter. She's a burden we can't afford." Her father's words came out harsh, but Amina could hear something breaking underneath. "Khalid needs workers, house servants. She'll be fed. She'll have a roof. It's better than watching her starve here. You're selling your daughter like an animal. I'm saving my family." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Amina's legs felt weak. She slid down the wall until she was sitting, her arms wrapped around her knees. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was happening. She understood that now. She'd heard stories about other girls, other families desperate enough to make such choices. She just never thought it would be her. Her mother was crying now, trying to be quiet about it. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow." "At dawn." That night, Amina couldn't eat the bread her mother gave her. She tried to make herself invisible, to disappear into the shadows. Her brothers played their usual games, unaware that everything was about to change. Rashid climbed into her lap and she held him close, memorizing the weight of him, the way his hair smelled like dust and sunshine. Her mother kept touching her face, her hands, her hair. She didn't say anything. What was there to say? They both knew her father was right in the worst possible way. Without this trade, they would all die. With it, at least the boys might survive. At least her parents might survive. Amina had learned long ago that in their world, daughters were worth less than sons. Sons carried on the family name. Sons could work the fields, earn money, support aging parents. Daughters cost money, needed dowries, left to join other families. She'd accepted this as truth the way she accepted the color of the sky. But accepting something in your mind and feeling it in your heart were different things. That night, she lay awake listening to her family breathe. She tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. Would Khalid be cruel? Would there be other servants to work with, or would she be alone? Would she ever see her family again? Morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Her mother braided her hair with shaking fingers. She gave Amina her own scarf, the blue one with silver threads that was the nicest thing she owned. "So you remember," she whispered. "So you remember you're loved." Her father wouldn't look at her. He stood outside, talking in low voices with Khalid, who had arrived with the sunrise. The merchant kept glancing at Amina like she was a goat he was considering buying. She felt her skin crawl but kept her face blank. Her mother had taught her that. Never let them see your fear. Never let them see your pain. The transaction was quick. Khalid's men brought the grain in rough sacks and stacked them inside the house. They brought the rifle too. It looked old but functional. Her father took it with hands that trembled slightly. "Take care of her," her mother said to Khalid. It wasn't a request. It was a mother's desperate command. Khalid smiled, showing yellow teeth. "She'll work hard. That's what she's there for." Amina kissed each of her brothers. Rashid cried and clung to her legs until her father pulled him away. "Be good," she told him. "Eat all your food. Grow strong." She hugged her mother one last time. "It's okay, Mama," she whispered, even though it wasn't okay, would never be okay. "I'll be all right." Her mother's tears soaked into her shoulder. Then Khalid's rough hand was on her arm, pulling her away. She climbed into the back of his truck with 2 other men. As they drove away, she looked back at her village, at her mother standing in the doorway, at her father's bent head. She watched until the dust made everything disappear. The ride to Khalid's compound took 3 hours. The men didn't speak to her. She sat in the truck bed, bouncing over rough roads, watching the landscape change. They passed other villages, all looking as desperate as her own. They passed checkpoints where armed men waved them through. The world felt bigger and more frightening than she'd imagined. Khalid's compound was surrounded by high walls. Inside, there were several buildings. Dogs barked from somewhere. The main house was 2 stories, bigger than anything in her village. Khalid led her to a side entrance and pushed her through. "Fatima," he shouted. An older woman appeared, thin and hard-faced. She looked Amina up and down with disapproval. "Another one? My cousin's brat got pregnant and had to leave. Need someone for the kitchen and cleaning." He turned to Amina. "This is Fatima. She runs the house. You do exactly what she says when she says it. You understand?" Amina nodded. "I didn't hear you." "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, what?" "Yes, sir." Khalid grunted and walked away. Fatima grabbed Amina's arm with bony fingers. "Come, I'll show you where you sleep and what your duties are. You'll wake at 4 in the morning. You'll work until you're told to stop. You get 2 meals a day if you work hard. If you're lazy, you get nothing. If you try to run away, you'll be beaten. If you steal, you'll be beaten worse. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." The room Amina was given was barely a room at all. It was more like a storage closet with a thin mat on the floor. No window, no blanket. But at least it had a door she could close. Her duties were endless. She hauled water, scrubbed floors, washed dishes, prepared vegetables, served meals to Khalid and his family. The family included his wife, who ignored her completely, and his 3 sons, who liked to kick her or knock things from her hands just to watch her scramble to pick them up. The work itself wasn't the worst part. She was used to hard work. The worst part was the complete absence of kindness. No one spoke to her except to give orders or insults. Fatima watched her constantly, ready to slap her for the smallest mistake. The food they gave her was scraps, leftovers that even the dogs wouldn't eat. At night, lying on her mat in the dark, Amina would touch her mother's scarf and cry as quietly as possible. She wondered if her brothers were eating the grain. She wondered if her father felt guilty. She wondered if anyone would remember her. 3 months passed like this. 3 months of bruises and exhaustion and hollow emptiness. She learned to move like a ghost, to be invisible, to never make eye contact. She learned which people to avoid and which corners to hide in when Khalid's temper flared. Then one morning, everything changed again. Khalid was in the courtyard talking to a man she'd never seen before. Their voices were angry. Money was mentioned. Debts. The stranger kept pointing at the house, demanding payment. Later that day, Fatima came to find her. "Pack your things," she said. Her voice was almost apologetic, which was somehow more frightening than her usual harshness. "Where am I going?" "Khalid owes money. You're part of the payment. There's a market town 2 hours from here. Someone will buy your contract." Amina felt her stomach drop. Sold again. Traded again. like she wasn't a person at all, just something to be exchanged when convenient. "Please," she heard herself say. "I'll work harder. I won't eat as much. Please don't. It's already decided. Be ready at dawn." That night was the longest of Amina's life. She had thought nothing could be worse than Khalid's house, but at least here she knew what to expect. At least here she knew the rules. Tomorrow she would be taken to strangers, sold to the highest bidder, sent to who knows where. She touched her mother's scarf and tried to remember what hope felt like. But hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. All she had now was survival, one day at a time, one moment at a time. The truck came for her at sunrise. The market town was nothing like Amina's village. It was loud and crowded, full of people shouting and selling things. The truck dropped her in front of a building where several other girls stood in a line. Most looked younger than her. Some were crying. Others stared at nothing with empty eyes. A man with a clipboard walked up and down, examining them like they were livestock. He poked Amina's arm, checked her teeth, asked her age. She answered in a whisper. He wrote something down and moved on. They stood there for what felt like hours. Men came and went, haggling over prices. One by one, the other girls were led away. Amina tried not to think about where they were going, tried not to imagine what would happen to them. By midday, only 3 girls remained. The sun beat down hard. Amina's legs ached from standing. Her throat was dry. No one had offered them water. That's when she first saw him. He was tall, with light hair and pale skin that marked him immediately as a foreigner. He wore dusty work clothes and carried a leather bag over one shoulder. But what struck Amina most was his face. He looked horrified. The man stopped in front of their line and stared. His blue eyes went wide. He turned to the man with the clipboard and said something in heavily accented Dari. The clipboard man shrugged and pointed at the girls, then at a price sheet. The foreigner's face went red. He raised his voice, gesturing angrily. Other men in the market started paying attention. Some laughed. The clipboard man looked annoyed and tried to wave him away, but the foreigner didn't leave. He pulled out a worn wallet and started counting money. The clipboard man's expression changed. Now he was interested. They argued back and forth. The foreigner kept pointing at Amina. Her heart started pounding. What did this stranger want with her? He didn't look like the other men who'd come through. He looked upset, almost sick. But that didn't mean anything. Bad men came in all types. Finally, money changed hands. The clipboard man grabbed Amina's arm and pushed her toward the foreigner. "She's yours," he said in Dari. "No refunds." The foreigner reached toward her and Amina flinched back. He stopped immediately, holding his hands up like he was approaching a frightened animal. He said something in a language she didn't understand, then tried again in broken Dari. "Not hurt, safe, come." Amina had no choice. She followed him through the market, keeping several steps behind. People stared at them. A foreign man with an Afghan girl. She could hear the whispers, see the knowing looks. Shame burned in her chest even though she'd done nothing wrong. He led her to a battered truck parked on the edge of the market. When he opened the passenger door, she hesitated. Getting in a vehicle with a strange man felt like stepping off a cliff. He seemed to understand her fear. He pointed to himself. "Jakob," he said slowly, then pointed at her with raised eyebrows. "Amina," she whispered. He nodded and smiled, but it was a sad smile. He gestured to the truck again. "Safe," he repeated. "I promise, safe." Promises meant nothing. She'd learned that. But what choice did she have? Run? To where? She was in a strange town with no money, no food, no one who cared if she lived or died. At least with this man she might eat today. She climbed into the truck. They drove for 20 minutes in silence. Jakob kept glancing at her like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Amina kept her eyes on her hands in her lap, trying to make herself small. The truck pulled up to a compound surrounded by walls. A sign near the gate had words in English and Dari. Something about international aid and reconstruction. Armed guards waved them through after checking Jakob's identification. Inside, the compound was different from Khalid's place. It was organized clean. There were several buildings, including one large structure that looked like offices. People of different nationalities walked around with purpose. Some wore UN vests, others carried tools and building supplies. Jakob parked and got out. He motioned for Amina to follow. She did, staying close but not too close. He led her to a smaller building at the back of the compound. Inside was a simple apartment with a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. It was cleaner than anywhere Amina had been in months. There was a real bed visible through one of the doorways, a window with actual glass, a table with chairs. Jakob disappeared into one of the bedrooms and came back with clothes. Girls' clothes, clean and folded. He set them on the table and then pointed to the second bedroom. "Yours," he said in Dari. Then he gestured to himself and the other room. "Mine." Amina stared at him. Her own room? That couldn't be right. He must have seen her confusion because he tried again, speaking slowly. He pointed at her, then at the bedroom, then made a sleeping gesture. "You sleep here, private door locks." He showed her the lock on the inside of the door. This had to be a trick. Men didn't give girls their own rooms with locks. Men didn't buy girls in markets and then offer them privacy. There had to be a catch. Jakob seemed to deflate a little, like he understood she didn't trust him. He rubbed his face, looking tired. Then he went to a cabinet and pulled out bread, cheese, and fruit. Real food, more than Amina had seen in one place for months. He put it on the table and gestured for her to eat. She didn't move. He sighed and took a piece of bread himself, eating it to show her it wasn't poisoned. Then he stepped back, giving her space. Amina's stomach won the battle with her fear. She moved to the table and grabbed a piece of bread. It was soft and fresh. She ate it so fast she nearly choked. Then another piece. The cheese was creamy and rich. The fruit was an apple, crisp and sweet. She couldn't remember the last time she'd tasted an apple. Jakob watched her with an expression she couldn't read. Not hungry or cruel or calculating. Just sad. When she'd eaten her fill, he showed her the bathroom. Running water. A real toilet soap. He mimed washing and pointed at the clothes again. "Shower, change, take time. I'll be outside." Then he left, closing the door behind him. Amina stood in the middle of the apartment, completely lost. This made no sense, none of it. Foreign men didn't buy girls and then give them food and privacy and ask nothing in return. It was a trap. It had to be. But the bread in her stomach was real. The soft clothes were real. And she was so tired of being afraid. She took the clothes and went into the bedroom he'd said was hers. It was small but clean. The bed had sheets and a pillow. There was even a small rug on the floor. She touched the pillow. It was soft. The bathroom was another miracle. The shower took her a while to figure out, but when the hot water hit her skin, she almost cried. She scrubbed away months of dirt and fear, watching it swirl down the drain. The soap smelled like flowers. She'd forgotten things could smell nice. The clothes fit reasonably well. Pants and a long tunic, both clean and whole with no tears or stains. There was even a fresh scarf. When she emerged, Jakob was sitting outside on a small patio drinking tea. He stood when he saw her and gave a small nod of approval. Then he gestured to the other chair. A woman appeared from around the corner of the building. She was Afghan, maybe 40, with a kind face and intelligent eyes. She wore modern clothes and carried a folder. "Hello, Amina," the woman said in perfect Dari. "My name is Nasrin. I work here as a translator and social worker. Jakob asked me to come explain things to you because his Dari is terrible." She smiled when she said this, and Jakob made a sheepish expression. Amina sat down slowly. Nasrin took the third chair. "I know you're confused and frightened," Nasrin continued. "What happened in the market today wasn't supposed to happen. Jakob works here with an aid organization. He builds schools and homes in villages that were destroyed by war. He was in town buying supplies when he saw what was happening. He was shocked. In his country, such things don't exist. He didn't understand at first what he was seeing." Amina listened but said nothing. When he realized girls were being sold, he became very upset. He used his own money to purchase your contract because he couldn't stand to see you sold to someone who might hurt you. Do you understand? "He bought me," Amina said flatly. "He paid money to stop someone else from buying you," Nasrin corrected gently. "Now he wants to make sure you're safe. You're not a servant here. You're not required to work. Jakob is trying to figure out how to help you properly, through legal channels, but these things take time. In the meanwhile, you can stay here. You'll have food, shelter, safety." He asked for nothing in return. It was too much to believe. Amina had learned the hard way that nothing in life was free.
"What does he want?"
Nasrin glanced at Jakob, who was watching them carefully even though he couldn't understand the conversation. She said something to him in English. He responded, his voice serious. Nasrin turned back to Amina. He says he wants you to have a chance at a real life. He lost his own daughter several years ago. She died from an illness. He couldn't save her. Maybe he thinks saving you will somehow make that hurt less. Maybe he just knows it's the right thing to do. Either way, he means what he says. I've known Jacob for 2 years. He's a good man. One of the truly good ones. Amina wanted to believe it. The hope rising in her chest felt dangerous, like something that could shatter and cut her from the inside. And if I want to leave? Then you leave. Jacob will even help you get somewhere safe if that's what you want. But think carefully. Out there, you're alone. Here, at least you have protection. The three of them sat in silence for a moment. Jacob poured more tea and offered a cup to Amina. She took it. The tea was sweet and hot. Perfect, I can stay? She asked Nasreen. Really stay? Without being locked up or forced to work? Really, I can't pay him back. I have nothing. He doesn't want payment. Amina looked at Jacob, then really looked at him. He met her eyes and gave her the smallest, saddest smile. Then he said something in English. Nasrin translated. He says you remind him of his daughter. Same serious eyes. Same strength hiding underneath fear. He says any father would want someone to help her if she were in trouble. He's just doing what he hoped someone would have done for his little girl. Something in Amina's chest cracked open. Not enough to let all the fear out, but enough to let a tiny bit of hope slip in. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. For now. Jacob's whole face brightened. He nodded enthusiastically and said something that made Nasreen laugh. He says thank you for trusting him, and he promises not to make you regret it. He also says he's a terrible cook, so we'll have to figure out meals together. That night, Amina lay in the bed in her room, with a door that locked from the inside. She'd tested the lock 3 times to be sure. The sheets were clean and soft. Through the window, she could see stars. She could hear Jacob moving around in the other room, washing dishes from their simple dinner. Nasrin had stayed to help them communicate, and they'd shared rice and vegetables that Jacob had cooked. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and there was enough, more than enough. Amina touched her mother's scarf, which she'd carefully washed and hung to dry. She thought about her family. Were they alive? Were the boys growing? Did they ever think about her? She thought about the market, about the other girls who'd been sold today. Where were they now? Were they safe? Probably not. Probably suffering like she'd suffered at Khalid's house. Or worse, but she was here, in a clean bed, with a full stomach, protected by a foreign man who asked for nothing and seemed to mean it. It felt like a dream. And Amina had learned that dreams don't last, but maybe, just maybe, this one would be different. Maybe Jacob really was what Nasrin said he was, one of the truly good ones. She closed her eyes and for the first time in months slept without nightmares. Amina woke in the middle of the night, gasping. For a few confused seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered. The compound, Jacob, the clean bed. She was safe, but safe felt like a word in a foreign language, something she'd heard about but never truly understood. She lay there in the darkness, listening. No sounds of Khalid's son stomping through the halls, no Fatima shouting orders, just quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own heartbeat. It scared her more than the noise ever had. The next morning, Jacob knocked softly on her door. "Breakfast," he called in his rough Dari. She could hear him moving around in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the smell of tea. When she emerged, he'd set out bread, jam, eggs, and fruit. So much food. He gestured for her to sit and eat. She did, but slowly, still waiting for the moment when he'd tell her what she owed him for all this kindness. The moment never came. He just ate his own breakfast, reading some papers, occasionally glancing at her with that same sad smile. After breakfast, he washed the dishes himself. Then he pointed to his watch and said something, making gestures that Amina eventually understood meant he had to go to work. He showed her how to lock the door from the inside, made sure she understood she could stay in the apartment, and then left. Amina stood alone in the quiet apartment. She could leave. She could walk right out. But to where? And what if this really was the safe place Nasreen had promised? She spent the morning exploring the small space that was supposedly hers now. She found books in languages she couldn't read, tools and building plans, photos of Jacob with other aid workers, and one photo, clearly special, in a simple frame on a shelf. It showed Jacob, younger and fuller in the face, standing with a woman and a small girl. The girl had blonde braids and was missing her front teeth in a huge smile. The woman had her arm around Jacob's waist. They all looked happy, the kind of happy Amina had only seen in rare glimpses. She understood then. This was his family. The wife and daughter he'd lost, or at least the daughter. She set the photo down carefully, feeling like she'd intruded on something private. Over the following days, a routine developed. Jakob would leave for work each morning. Sometimes Nasrin would visit, bringing supplies, helping Amina and Jakob communicate. She explained that Jakob built homes and schools in villages damaged by war. He was a carpenter and engineer, she said. A good man doing good work. Amina watched Jakob carefully. She'd learned to read men, to spot the signs of anger or cruelty before they exploded. But Jakob showed no such signs. He was patient, almost painfully gentle. He never raised his voice. Never moved too quickly toward her. Always gave her space. It made her suspicious. No one was this good. One afternoon, about a week after she'd arrived, Jakob came home carrying wood planks and tools. He set them up on the patio and started working, cutting and sanding, measuring and fitting pieces together. Amina watched from the window, curious despite herself. He was making something. A small box carefully crafted with smooth joints. He worked with complete focus, the kind that came from years of practice. His hands moved with certainty and skill. When he noticed her watching, he smiled and gestured for her to come outside. She hesitated, then stepped onto the patio. He showed her the wood, let her touch it, feel how smooth he'd sanded it. Then he handed her a piece of sandpaper and showed her how to rub it along the grain. It was the first time anyone had taught her something that wasn't about cleaning or serving. The first time someone had treated her like she was capable of creating, rather than just maintaining. They worked in comfortable silence. Jakob would occasionally correct her technique, his touches brief and instructive. Never lingering. Never inappropriate. Just teaching. The box, when finished, had a hinged lid and a small latch. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Jakob presented it to her with a little bow that made her almost smile. Yours, he said, for keeping things safe. That night, Amina placed her mother's scarf in the box. It fit perfectly. The days turned into weeks. Jakob continued his routine and Amina continued watching, waiting for the trap to spring. But it never did. Instead, small kindnesses kept appearing. Books with pictures that helped her learn. A warmer blanket as the weather grew colder. Fresh fruit even though it was expensive. Nasrin visited often. She started bringing papers and pencils, teaching Amina to read and write properly. Not just Dari, but English too. Skills, Nasrin explained. Skills give you freedom. The more you know, the more choices you have. Amina absorbed it all like dry earth soaking up rain. She'd always been clever, but she'd never had the chance to use her mind before. Now, with time and safety and encouragement, she discovered she loved learning. Loved the way letters formed words. Words formed sentences, sentences formed ideas. Jakob started teaching her too, though his methods were more practical. He'd bring her to his workshop on the compound and show her how to measure, how to cut straight lines, how to join pieces of wood. He had the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed teaching. One day, about 2 months after her arrival, Jakob came home looking troubled. Nasrin arrived shortly after with the same expression. They all sat down together. There's something we need to tell you, Nasrin began, translating as Jakob spoke. Jakob has been asking questions, trying to understand your situation legally. He's been speaking with lawyers and aid organizations about how to help you properly. Amina's stomach tightened. Here it came, the end of this impossible dream. The problem is complicated, Nasrin continued. You were sold illegally, but proving that and finding your family to return you safely is difficult. The region you came from is unstable. Jakob has been trying to locate your village, your family, to see if reconciliation is possible. I don't want to go back, Amina said quickly. The words surprised her, but they were true. Her family had sold her. Her father had traded her for a rifle and grain. Going back meant returning to being unwanted, a burden. Please, I'll work. I'll do anything. Just don't send me back. Jakob's face crumpled with sadness. He said something urgently to Nasrin. He says he would never force you to go somewhere you don't want to go, Nasrin translated. He's trying to figure out how to help you have a real future. A legal one. There are programs, schools for girls, but they all require paperwork and guardianship. Without a legal guardian, you're invisible to the system. What does that mean? Amina asked. Nasrin and Jakob exchanged a long look. It means Jacob is considering trying to become your legal guardian. To adopt you, essentially. It would give you protection, documentation, access to education and medical care. But it's complicated because he's a foreigner, and the laws here about adoption are strict. It could take months, maybe a year to process, if it's even possible. Amina stared at Jacob. Why would you do that? Nasrin translated the question. Jacob's answer was long and emotional. When he finished, Nasrin took a moment before translating. He says that when he saw you in that market, he saw his daughter, not in appearance but in circumstance, helpless, afraid, at the mercy of cruel people. He couldn't save his daughter from her illness. The doctors tried everything, but she died anyway. It broke him. For a long time, he could barely function. That's why he came here to Afghanistan, to do something useful with his grief. When he saw you, it felt like the universe was giving him a chance to do what he couldn't do before, to save someone's daughter since he couldn't save his own. Tears were streaming down Jacob's face now. He wiped at them roughly, embarrassed. But he kept talking. He says you deserve a childhood. You deserve school and friends and dreams about the future. You deserve to be more than what was done to you. If you'll let him, he wants to try to give you that. Not as a servant or an obligation, but as family. Real family. Amina felt something shifting inside her chest. That locked door she'd built around her heart was creaking open. What if I'm too broken? She whispered. What if I can't be the daughter he wants? Nasrin smiled sadly. He says you're not broken. You're surviving. And he doesn't want you to be his daughter who died. He wants you to be Amina, whoever Amina wants to become. He just wants to help you become her. For the first time since being sold, Amina cried. Not silent tears in the darkness, but real sobs that shook her whole body. Jacob moved closer, hesitant, and when she didn't pull away, he put his arm around her shoulders. It was the first time a man had touched her with simple kindness. With nothing expected in return, she leaned into him and cried for everything she'd lost and everything she might gain. The process of trying to adopt Amina was as complicated as Nasrin had warned. There were lawyers and officials and endless questions. Some people were supportive. Others were suspicious of a foreign man trying to adopt an Afghan girl. The bureaucracy moved like honey in winter. But while they waited, life continued. Amina's world expanded slowly. Jacob started taking her to the villages where he worked. She watched him measure foundations and teach local men carpentry skills. She saw how he treated everyone with respect, how he listened more than he talked, how he always left people better than he found them. The village people were curious about her. Some women would smile and offer her tea. Some men would frown and mutter about foreigners and their strange ways. But gradually they accepted her presence. The strange girl who followed the Swedish carpenter around. Amina started helping with the work. Small things at first, holding tools, organizing supplies, then bigger things, measuring planks, painting walls. She had good hands and a careful eye. Jacob praised her work genuinely, and the praise felt like sunshine after years of rain. She grew stronger. Not just physically, though the regular meals and hard work did fill out her too thin frame. But mentally, emotionally, the nightmares didn't stop, but they came less often. The flinching whenever someone moved too quickly started to fade. The constant anxiety began to ease. One evening, about 4 months after Jacob had brought her to the compound, they were working together to build a bookshelf for her room. Jacob had explained the project entirely in simple Darian gestures, and Amina had understood. They worked side by side, him cutting, her sanding and fitting pieces together. Thank you, she said suddenly in English. She'd been practicing with Nasrin. Jacob looked up, surprised. English. Very good. Thank you, she repeated. For everything. For seeing me. For saving me. Jacob set down his tools and looked at her seriously. He spoke slowly in Dari, choosing words she would understand. You saved yourself. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it. You're the one who chose to be brave every day. That's all you, Amina, not me. She didn't fully believe him, not yet. But she filed the words away in her heart, next to the other small kindnesses he'd shown her. That night, she placed the new bookshelf in her room. It was the first piece of furniture she'd helped build. The first thing in her life that she'd created rather than just endured. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood and felt something she hadn't felt in so long. Pride. Simple, pure pride in work well done. Outside her window, she could hear Jacob making dinner, humming some Swedish song off-key. The sound made her smile. Maybe, just maybe, Nasreen had been right. Maybe Jacob really was one of the truly good ones, and maybe in time she could learn to be good too. Not perfect, not unafraid, but good, whole, free. She touched the wooden box Jacob had made for her, running her fingers over the smooth joints. Inside was her mother's scarf, a photo Nasreen had taken of her and Jacob working together, and a small carved bird Jacob had made during a slow afternoon. These were her treasures now. Evidence that this new life was real, that she mattered to someone, that she was more than a transaction, more than a burden. She was Amina. And for the first time in her 12 years, that felt like enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 months after Jacob had brought Amina to the compound. Nasreen came to the apartment earlier than usual, her face tight with worry. Jacob was already at work in one of the villages, so it was just the two of them. "There's been a development," Nasreen said carefully, sitting across from Amina at the small kitchen table. "The lawyers finally tracked down information about your village. They made contact with local elders there." Amina's hands went cold. She set down the English workbook she'd been studying. "And your family is alive. Your father, mother, and brothers. They're still in the same village." Nasreen paused, watching Amina's face. "The lawyers explained the situation. That Jacob is trying to adopt you to give you a legal status in future. They asked if your family would consent." "What did they say?" Amina's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Your father refused. He says you were sold legally according to village custom. He received payment and has no right to reclaim you. He won't sign any papers." Amina should have felt relieved. She didn't want to go back. But instead she felt a sharp pain under her ribs. Her own father wouldn't even claim her, wouldn't even acknowledge she'd been his daughter once. "There's more," Nasreen continued gently. "Someone else has come forward. The merchant, Khalid. He claims he still owns your contract. He says Jacob had no right to purchase you from the market dealer because you already belonged to him. He's demanding either your return or compensation." "No." The word came out flat and hard. "I won't go back there. We know. Jacob knows. He's prepared to fight this, but it's complicated. Khalid has connections. He's claiming this is a legal matter, a contract dispute. He's even gotten some local officials on his side." Amina felt the walls closing in. Just when she'd started to believe in safety, the past was reaching out to drag her back. Nasreen reached across the table and took her hand. "Listen to me. Jacob will not let them take you. He's already contacted the international organizations. There are lawyers working on this. We have documentation of what happened, where you came from, what Khalid did, but you need to be prepared. There might be a hearing. You might have to testify, tell them what happened." The thought made her stomach turn. "In front of people?" "Probably. But you'd have advocates with you. Translators, people who believe you and want to help. It won't be easy, but it might be necessary to keep you safe." That night when Jacob came home and Nasreen explained everything in Swedish, his face turned red with anger. Not at Amina, but at the situation. He paced the small apartment, talking rapidly, gesturing sharply. Finally, he stopped in front of Amina and knelt down so they were eye to eye. He spoke slowly in his improving Dari. "I promise. No one takes you. I fight, we fight. You are safe here. You stay here. What if they make me go?" Amina asked. Jacob's jaw tightened. "Then I take you away. Different country? Canada, Sweden, anywhere. I break rules if I must. But you do not go back to bad men, never." It was the most intense she'd ever seen him. This gentleman who built homes and carved wooden birds was ready to break laws to protect her. The realization made her eyes sting with tears. The next few weeks were tense. Lawyers came and went. Papers were filed. Nasreen spent hours on phone calls, arguing with officials, building their case. The international aid organization Jacob worked for got involved, putting pressure on local authorities. They argued that Khalid's claims were based on illegal human trafficking, not legitimate contracts. Through it all, Jacob tried to keep Amina's routine normal. They still worked together on building projects. She still studied with Nasreen. But the shadow of uncertainty hung over everything. Then the summons came. There would be a hearing with the district governor and a council of elders. Both sides would present their case. Khalid would be there. Amina would need to testify. The night before the hearing, Amina couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, remembering Khalid's compound. The cruelty, the hunger, the constant fear. The thought of seeing him again made her feel sick. There was a soft knock on her door. Amina? Jakob's voice, concerned. You are awake? Yes, can I come in? She hesitated, then said yes. Jakob opened the door but stayed in the doorway, respecting her space even now. He held something in his hands. I want to show you something, he said, moving slowly into the room and sitting on the floor near her bed. Not on it. He handed her a worn photograph. It was the one from the living room. Him, his wife, his daughter. Her name was Linnea, he said quietly. She was 8 when she got sick, cancer. We tried everything. Every treatment, every doctor. But nothing worked. She died after 2 years of fighting. Amina looked at the little girl's gap-toothed smile. After she died, I was angry. So angry at the world, at God, at everyone. My wife and I, we grew apart. The grief was too much. She stayed in Sweden. I came here. He paused, searching for words in Dari. I came here to punish myself, I think. To live in hard places, do hard work. To feel pain on the outside that matched the inside. I'm sorry, Amina whispered. No, listen. When I saw you in that market, something changed. Linnea used to ask me all the time, Papa, why don't people help each other more? She was always worried about other people, even when she was sick. Always trying to make everyone smile. He smiled sadly at the memory. That day in the market, I heard her voice. Papa, help her. So I did. And helping you has helped me. You understand? Amina nodded, not trusting her voice. Tomorrow will be hard. Seeing that man again will be hard. But you are not the same girl he bought. You are stronger now. Smarter. You have people who stand with you. And no matter what happens in that room, you are not alone. I am there. Nasrin is there. The lawyers are there. We fight together. What if I'm too scared to talk? Then you're scared. That's okay. Brave is not scared, and brave is scared but doing it anyway. You've been brave every day since I met you. Tomorrow will be no different. He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. You know what Linnea would say about you? She would say you are a warrior. She loved stories about warriors. And that's what you are, Amina. A warrior. After he left, Amina held the photograph for a long time, looking at the little girl who'd never gotten to grow up. She thought about what it meant to be brave, to be a warrior. She'd never thought of herself that way. She'd only thought of herself as someone things happened to. But maybe that was changing. The hearing room was smaller than Amina had imagined. It was in a government building in the provincial capital, a 2-hour drive from the compound. The walls were plain, the furniture simple. A long table at the front where the governor and 4 elders sat. Chairs arranged in rows facing them. Khalid was already there when they arrived. He looked exactly as Amina remembered. Fat, well-dressed eyes like a snake. When he saw her, he smiled. It made her skin crawl. Jacob moved closer to her instinctively. Nasrin stayed on her other side. The lawyers, 2 men from an international human rights organization, sat in front of them. The hearing began. It was all in Dari, which Jacob couldn't fully follow, so Nasrin whispered translations to him throughout. Khalid spoke first, presenting his case. He claimed he'd purchased Amina legally from her father. He had witnesses, he said. Documentation. When she'd been taken from the market, his property had been stolen. He was smooth, confident. He painted himself as the victim, a legitimate businessman who'd been robbed by a foreign man who didn't understand local customs, the lawyers countered. They presented evidence that the initial transaction constituted human trafficking. They had statements from aid workers, documentation from the market where Jacob had found Amina. They argued that no contract for the sale of a human being could be considered legal under Afghan or international law. Back and forth it went. The elders asked questions. The governor took notes. Amina sat frozen, listening to people argue over her like she was an object, not a person sitting right there. Finally, the governor looked at her. The girl should speak. Let her tell us what she wants. Nasrin squeezed her hand. Jacob leaned close and whispered in his broken Dari, You can do this. Amina stood on shaking legs. Everyone was looking at her. Khalid stared with those snake eyes, a warning clear in his expression. Don't say anything stupid. She almost sat back down. Almost let the adults decide her fate again. But then she thought about Linnea. the little girl in the photograph who'd asked why people didn't help each other more. She thought about Jakob, who'd seen her in that market and decided to help even though it cost him money and time. And now all this trouble. She thought about the bookshelf in her room that she'd built with her own hands. "My name is Amina," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "I am 13 years old. When I was 12, my father sold me to that man." She pointed at Khalid. "He traded me for a rifle and grain because my family was starving." The room was completely silent now. Khalid treated me like an animal. I worked from before sunrise until after dark. I was hit when I was slow. I slept on the floor. I was fed scraps. After 3 months, he decided to sell me again to pay a debt. He took me to the market and sold me like I was a goat. She could see Khalid's face darkening, but she kept going. Jakob saw what was happening and couldn't believe it. In his country, people don't buy children. He used his own money to stop someone else from buying me. Then he took me to his home and gave me my own room, my own bed. He gave me food and clothes and asked for nothing. He taught me to read and write. He taught me to build things. He treats me like a person, not property." Her voice grew stronger. "I don't want to go back to Khalid's house. I would rather die than go back there. Jakob wants to adopt me, to give me a legal name and future, to let me go to school, to let me be more than a servant. Please don't send me back, please." She sat down, trembling. Jakob put his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. Nasrin was crying quietly beside her. The governor and elders talked among themselves for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, the governor spoke. "This is a complicated matter. There are questions of law and custom. But I am also a father. I have daughters." He looked at Khalid with open disgust. "I find your claim troubling, sir. This child was trafficked regardless of what papers you may have." Khalid started to object, but the governor held up his hand. "However, I cannot make this decision alone. This will go to a higher court. In the meantime, the girl will remain in the custody of Mr. Jacob under the supervision of the International Aid Organization. She is not to be removed from the compound. We will reconvene in 60 days. It wasn't a final answer, but it was something. They had 60 more days. 60 days to build their case stronger. 60 days of safety." As they left the building, Khalid pushed past them. He stopped next to Amina and spoke in a low voice that only she could hear. "This isn't over, girl. You belong to me. I always collect what I'm owed." But this time, his words didn't break her. This time, she had people standing beside her. This time, she stood a little taller. "No," she said quietly. "I belong to myself." Jakob might not have understood the words, but he understood the tone. He moved between Amina and Khalid, his usually gentle face hard as stone. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Khalid sneered and walked away. In the truck driving back to the compound, Amina stared out the window at the mountains. 2 months. They had 2 months to figure this out. 2 months until the next hearing. It wasn't much, but it was time, and time, she was learning, could change everything.